Plus One Forward, the podcast powered by the apocalypse, where we talk about tabletop role-playing games using or inspired by the Apocalypse engine. I'm your co-MC Rich, and I'm joined by...
your co-MC Rach.
Yeah, that's right, and we have two guests with us, Rich Howard and Richard Kreutz-Landry. That's right, a gaggle of riches. I can guarantee the most rich content in any Plus One Forward ever.
This episode is far too rich for my blood.
Hey, Rich.
Hey, Rich.
Hey, Richard.
Hey, Rich.
Oh, this is going to be awkward.
It's going to be awesome.
This
I love
is
it.
the doctor.
Exactly.
Yes.
We often get eye rolls at the puns we have for our own game. I think this might be worse.
It might be. All right. Let's ask you guys our normal intro question. Rich, how long have you been playing PBTA games, and what was your gateway?
That's a great question as far as how long. I think it's been about 3-4 years. And it started with Masks. And I was listening to a lot of podcasts. So I'm pretty sure Nerds on a Roll was in there really early. And then the first time I actually played Masks officially, I'd messed around with my friends for a little bit, was actually with Brendan on my podcast, Whelmed, the Young Justice Files. He came on and ran a lost episode of Young Justice for us, and using the actual system, and it was it was one of the best games I've had in decades. He knows his game and he knows that show, so it was pretty amazing.
Yeah, and if I remember, you played Robin, right?
Of course I did. Yeah, anybody who knows me definitely knows I'm Dick Grayson. It was before he became Nightwing too, but it was great. We had a bunch of great people on, Ishan Sherwood and Darcy Ross and Neil Powell, and it was great. It was a fantastic game.
Great. I do recommend that particular episode. We will put it in the show notes. Now, the question is for you, Richard. How long have you been playing PBTA games, and what was your gateway?
For me, it's been about 3 or 4 years as well. The first game that I got into was actually Dungeon World.
Nice.
Funny story about that. I got it confused with World of Dungeons.
Oh, no.
And so I went and I grabbed that, and I was like, this doesn't sound like the game that the RPG Academy was playing at all.
This is so short.
Yeah, I was
Where are
very
the
confused.
moves?
And then I finally realized my mistake and went and picked it up. I've run it twice, and I ran it terribly both times, and then decided that we would write our own PBTA game with that little bit of experience, which is always a wise decision.
Right. Also on the team, we have Taylor Labreche, who is a brilliant designer who had way more experience in PBTA specifically, which is one of the reasons why we brought him on board for design. Of course, over the last 2+ years now, Richard, right, that we've been designing it, clearly we've got a grasp of what's going on now.
A little bit
better.
But yeah, we couldn't have done it without Taylor. He is fantastic.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
All right. Well, fantastic. Let's jump on over here and read a sitch. Read a sitch.
Read a Sitch is a segment of the interview where our guests will discuss some aspect of Powered by the Apocalypse play that they want to shine a little bit more light on. And it sounded like both of you, Rich and Richard, had different things you want to talk about. So let's start with Richard first this time.
So I came to gaming through my older brother. He did a lot of, old traditional games, all that kind of stuff. But I went to college for theater. And you would think that, yes, someone who has literally a theater degree must love doing voices and really getting into character and all these things. And I do, but not always. And so the thing I wanted to talk about was being giving at the table with the energy that you bring with the characters that you play and everything. I have realized over, especially the last couple of years where I'm running a lot of PBTA, that given my preference, I will almost always engage in sort of the narrative or descriptive voice rather than jumping into a character and playing an NPC. One of the things that I'm challenging myself to do more now is to try and do that, because there are players who really want that, right? Who want to have that sort of in-character dialogue. As the person running the game, it's your responsibility partly to make sure that everybody's having a good time at the table, and that you're making sure that you are giving each of the players the experience that they want, right? for myself, I realized that, oh, okay, like that's something that I need to work on. I need to practice. And some of the moves, even different playbooks, different games will like let you create an NPC, or you'll have a rival or an adversary or something. And what I found is that I was doing players who had chosen that option a disservice by not sort of jumping into the character and working with them on the way that they had signaled to me that, hey, like this is a thing that I want to have happen in the game.
Do you have any advice to GMs or players who might be a little bit hesitant about opening up and exploring their characters more fully at the table?
Yeah. There's a sort of stereotypical thing of, oh, I sing in the shower, or I practice silly voices in the shower kind of thing. In general, I think if you're sitting down at a table with your friends, people who, you know, you're trusting to tell a story with, you can say, hey, I'm going to go with a silly voice, or I'm going to try and do this thing, work with me, right? If there are NPCs that you can put into the game who don't have to be the big bad evil person with, you know, like the villainous monologue or the very heartfelt speech, you know, if you want to run into Bob the bartender in the Mad Max village who has a weird tick, like you can do that. And that's a way that you can like practice with that and sort of get buy-in from people around the table that, hey, it's okay to be silly as we try this out and get more comfortable with it. The other thing that you can do, you know, getting back to giving sort of with your energy at the table is there's I forget whether it's an agenda or a principle or whatever, you know, be a fan of the players, right? That's also like, as a player at the table, no matter whether you're running the game or whether you're there to play or, you know, run a PC, you want to like put that energy out there that you would want to receive, right? So if you're a little nervous about doing character voices or making a bold choice or something, and you're worried about how other people at the table will react to that, be the person going, yeah, that's a great choice, or yeah, let's do this, when someone else does that. And it's sort of like it creates that sort of togetherness at the table where everyone starts to feel comfortable and is encouraged to do the thing. If you laugh at somebody who's trying to do something heartfelt, or you say, oh no, that's a terrible idea, well, what's the likelihood that that person is going to want to do that again, or risk being open or vulnerable at the table? If you can, you want to like do as much as you can to encourage people that like, hey, this is a cool thing that we're doing together. Yeah, awesome.
So one of the things that I do too, in addition to what everything Richard was saying, is sometimes, depending on the game really, but in almost any game that I run, I've been able to do this. If they run into someone like, would you say Bob the bartender?
Yeah.
And you know what they're there for, right, Bob? That they're getting information from Bob the bartender, and you know what the information they have and don't have. I take a little 3x5 card. I write a couple of notes down, like, okay, Bob knows this, Bob doesn't know that, quickly, and then hand it to another player and say, you're playing Bob the bartender. Right? This is what you know, go with it. And so, and that's, of course, you have to have buy-in from the table and that kind of stuff. But I do that sometimes with characters in PBTA games and in other games like D&D too, with when they have like an animal companion or something like that, where they have a trusted friend at the table, like the players are really good friends. Sometimes I'll have another player play that character, play that NPC, or play that supporting cast character or mentor or animal companion even at times. Particularly if I get a bunch of people with a bunch of animal companions, which has happened in a few of my games, and so everybody plays somebody else's animal companion, and it can get really interesting. But again, you have to have a table that's trustworthy. I don't know if I'd pull some of that at like a one-shot table, right? But when you have a table of trusted people, and that way everybody can be like, oh, this isn't my character. I can be as silly or funny or whatever as I want and throw this 3x5 card away when I get done. And just try and yes and whatever they say. And once they get some practice at it, the players are pretty into it, I find.
That sounds like a great bit of starting advice for trying to get your characters to open up and hone more of being in the character space. Rich, I'm going to, again, turn the metaphorical camera over to you. What is some feature of Powered by the Apocalypse, table culture, or play that you feel we should be giving a little bit more spotlight and discussion on?
One of the things that I've run into is, because I've run masks now quite a lot. I've played a few different PBTA games. It's my favorite. There's definitely a lot of influence from masks in our game as well. But when I have run it at one-shots at conventions, I've been surprised, but probably half the time that I've run a table, at least one, sometimes two people, usually friends, come to the table with pre-generated PBTA characters. And that's a challenge because they clearly are coming with this deep relationship with each other, and they have this like whole plan out and, you know, that kind of stuff. And it became a challenge for me to try and figure out like, okay, they really have a deep background going on, and I want to honor that because they're excited to play this trope, right? I want a teenage superhero nonsense. They are fully in and invested, so I want to honor that. But I also don't want to like overstep everybody else at the table. And so the only thing that I've been able to do to roll with that is to try and make sure that I'm actually making even on the spot links with other characters at the table. And I'll do that with other games that aren't PBTA. The link system in PBTA just blows my mind. I mean, it seems so simple and straightforward. They do similar things in Fate and some other games, and some of us did that way back in the day when it was just D&D, which I think some of these moves and some of these things in modern game design that are so brilliant, some of them had these tiny little seeds of things we were all trying to like, this doesn't work, we're trying to fix it, right? But they found a way to hone it and kind of master it. So making that connection with other people and make sure that that gets spread around, the spotlight gets spread around as much as possible on a one-shot game is obviously it's critical, particularly when you have 5 or 6 people at a table that don't know each other.
So you let the bond between the players who know each other stay, and then just encourage a more open discussion about bonds and links with other people at the table?
Yeah, exactly. So I make sure that I want to honor that connection they have, but I want to make sure that we want their story in everybody else's story, and we want everybody else's story in their story. Peanut butter and chocolate, we want to mix it all together as much as we can, if at all possible. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Rich, I actually have run into something similar. It's not necessarily one-shots at cons, but on Saturdays, I run Star Wars Saturdays, and every month I cycle in a different game, but it's an ongoing kind of living campaign. So some players will play a character in, say, February in one particular game, and then their schedule opens up on Saturday mornings in, say, June. And so they come back to the table, and I do my best to try to allow them to play the same character, but they have a whole new cast around them, right? Because it's an RSVP system with the Gauntlet. I never know for sure who's going to be able to make it from month to month. And it is an absolute challenge, without a doubt. A couple of things that I try to do, and I'm sure you do this as well, although one of them you can't, but one thing I try to do, because I can actually pull the data from previous games, I use these nerdy little Google spreadsheets for data sets within the Star Wars game here. So what the different species are, and pictures of them, and here's the NPCs. I'll just pull over some of those NPCs that were created in that particular game and preload it into the Google Character Keeper for the game we have now. So when somebody drops a name,
so good.
like, oh, it's so and so, Timo the Hutt, they can the players are like, wait, what does that even mean? And there's the NPC tab, and they go, oh, okay, all right, cool. I have a little grabby bit of that. And then the other thing that I try to do is focus on. I try to pretend that I am the brand new viewer who's watching episode 160 of an ongoing serial, and I ask a lot of questions, even if I know the answer of like, oh yeah, I totally know who that person is. I'll try to draw it out of the player and make them kind of GM for a moment to tell us what the cool bit is about thing that they've just dropped some knowledge on from previous canon of this campaign that we have, and put them on spotlight so that they can not only inform the other players, but also give me a filter of what exactly they remember from way back in February. And I found it to be really helpful.
Nice. One of the things on a similar vein that I did in one of the games was I had these 2 people had built these characters obviously together before they got to the table. And so I basically just said, like, at the end of their 4-issue mini series introductory arc that was their entire adventure, they met you guys in this, you know, climactic final scene, right? So like, how did your team come together? Ended up being like, basically they got this impression of like, oh, we've had our own comic for like 4 issues, right? And that's where that's coming from. And so they get that, again, you got to lean into the feel. Like when most PBTA games have some kind of, you know, trope or idea or through line of story that you're going through, and that's what draws people to those games, right? You know, Monster of the Week or, you know, Monster Hearts, right? You kind of know what you're getting into. So clearly they want that feel for masks, and that was an easy way to do it, that I didn't have to literally do anything except just imply that there had been some history there.
It's nice. That reminds me of like the Dresden Files RPG, and how you know 2 players will come up with this dime store novel that they both co-starred in. It's really cool.
I haven't played that yet. I've heard good things.
Rich, did you have anything else you wanted to talk about with PBTA one-shots and pre-gens?
No, that's pretty much it. It's a tough thing to do when you're at the table. Like so many people are used to D&D or whatever and bringing their own pre-gen characters, but PBTA really thrives on that building that
Yeah.
at the table. So, but you can get around it. You just want to make sure people are coming and having a good time. Like you're saying, like be fans of the players, be fans of the characters.
Yeah, if you don't
But-
mind me intruding, I find it fascinating because when coaching people to GM one-shots, the two big offenders in terms of people coming with very established notions to the table are superheroes games and Star Wars games.
Sure,
Mhm.
yeah.
People have precious Mary Stews and Gary Stews that they really want to play.
I do my best with their 10-page backstories. That's all.
Rich, do you want to read my multiple novels of
Hard thing.
backstory?
Oh no.
No.
Neither Rich wants that.
Thank you, Rich and Richard. I think these two topics do spotlight things that our listeners can really take a lot away from.
Open your brain.
All right, we are opening our brain now to Descent into Midnight, which I will do my best to make sure that the S is in the show title so that we're not decent in midnight, my friends. I'm terrible. I don't know why. That's a thing I want to make a joke out of.
It started me thinking about multiple storylines at the table that were not in any way decent.
No.
Hashtag CloudCon.
Yeah.
Let's jump on in and learn a bit about this game here. So, Descent into Midnight, what is the setting and what's it about?
In Descent into Midnight, you're playing aquatic creatures in an advanced alien civilization that has never been touched by human existence. The technology in the civilization is based on bioengineering and psionics, and the players play guardians that are defending their home from a physical, maybe social and or existential corruption that's affecting their metropolis home city.
Wow, that's some high concept.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It only really touches the surface of the pie concept. But the part of
surface. Nice little water
what
pun.
did I say?
That's good.
You have so many riches. I
This
gotta try and
podcast is
catch
full
up.
of riches.
Mhm.
One of the things that people are finding interesting here for our game is this alien setting. The idea that it's never been touched by human existence. So there's no metal submarines and speedboats, and that's not a thing. Not that you couldn't do it if you want to, but the core kind of through line of the game is this idea that we're building like empathy and understanding with a culture or civilization that's completely alien, and it's also freeing people up to really question what is a character. What defines a character? Do you have to be humanoid? No, you can literally be anything that you want in our setting, in the psionics and the bioengineering, and kind of covers all bases to have people be able to create whatever they want to do in this setting. And the game guides people to help create this civilization and really get a feel for it.
Okay. What mechanics are different in this game versus, say, Apocalypse World?
So as Rich mentioned, we don't have set like species. There's no like specific city that you're defending. The corruption itself is even sort of it is a nebulous thing that you sort of like nail down at the table together during the world building. In the one shots that we've run, it's been everything from pollution to a big giant slimy goopy monster to climate change, paranoia.
I had a game over Gen Con, this last Gen Con, that the corruption ended up developing into being that their sun was going nova.
Yeah.
And so they had to address that problem in a way I could not grasp. And then they did it, and it blew my brain open. Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah.
And with the there's no set species. Like Rich was saying, you can literally play anything. So we have had people who have played a literal plankton a la SpongeBob running around, one tiny little thing. We've had people who have played leviathans the size of a city. We've had people who have played the embodiment of echolocation. Shout out to Neil. We've had players who were there's the concept of the echo, which is sort of like the dimension next door, maybe, is one way to look at it. If you're familiar with D&D, you could look at it similar to the astral plane, but it's the world beyond the physical world. And we had a player who played the interface between the physical world and the echo, and it worked. And you can play a dolphin if you want to.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Or a tuna.
Yeah.
Or a walrus. It doesn't matter. You don't need to have any knowledge of modern Earth science, but you can use it as inspiration, and people almost always do, and end up teaching other people at the table a little bit about that thing they learned on that documentary that one time that horrified them.
We've had a lot of people who have showed up to our con games specifically because they had heard about the game and their friend was like, oh, you hate the ocean or you're terrified of it. I'm going to drag you to this game. And then everyone has had a great time.
And part of that's because of this idea that we don't have set species or city or corruption even. Like, people can ease into the level in which they're comfortable to create the place in which they're protecting. And because of that, they actually build quite a bond. We've gotten a little bit of a reputation as a emotional heart wrecker. But really, the game is about hope punk. And it's about the long-term fighting of things that can be very scary by building community and altruistic actions and hope. And over long periods of time. But of course, in those one-shot games, we're like, hey, let's build this beautiful thing that you guys love, and then let me just kick it over and see how you feel about that. How does that make you feel?
I think the way we're getting all of this buy-in is that we're allowing agency to everyone at the table to build things together, similar to the way that you have links or bonds. We're building the setting that way as well. And essentially, everything that is happening at the table is something that we have created together, as opposed to I, the GM, have gone off and written a story, and you are now experiencing that. And it grows like organically and exponentially. Even with the same 4 elements, it will always look vastly different.
I'm constantly just floored by the worlds and the species and the communities and cultures and history that the people at the table bring. Like, even just random people. I had 4 players signed up for the game. They'd only played Pathfinder. I was like, at Gen Con, I was like, how did you even find us, first of all? And this is your first PBTA game? All right, buckle up. Here we go. And, they were crying at the end of the game. They were like, what just happened? What was this thing? What is player agency? Now I understand. And and I was crying too.
Let me ask you an easy question. This is low-hanging fruit, guys. It's a totally easy question.
You
no
say
one ever has
that.
problems with.
I don't trust you, Rich.
What is your favorite move of the entire game that you've written? The whole game, think of all the moves and tell me, what is your favorite move and why, Richard?
Okay, I have a cop-out answer and I have a real answer. So the cop-out answer is a thing that isn't actually a move, but that I'm very proud of. At the beginning of the session and at the end of each session, we frame the sessions with guided visualizations or a meditation session, a brief one. Part of the premise of the game is that you are playing these guardians of this city, and they are especially gifted psionically. And so they are able to project their consciousness into this space that we call the sanctuary. And it's, if you're familiar with Headspace, right, where you're able to sort of share and experience all the things that the other characters are doing, so you don't have to do any sort of like meta knowledge of, oh, were you there to hear this conversation and all that nonsense. These characters are so strongly linked that they can share and experience everything with each other should they choose to, and they have a sort of place in the echo where they can exist, and their emotions and their consciousness can go there. And so what we do is we start out the session and we say, okay, let's define this sanctuary, and everyone closes their eyes and you take a deep breath, and the guide will start out maybe by saying something like, the water temperature is perfectly warm. There's light filtering down from above. There are shadows as fish swim above this space, and then describe a little bit about it. And then they ask each of the players, what does your character share an experience in this space? And you go around and they each add a detail, some sensation or some feeling. So a character who's from the deep thermal vents might describe how the water there in their portion of this space is very warm, or if they have a garden that it's vibrant and filled with plants. And so you go around and you picture this space together, and it gets everyone kind of in the mood, in the right headspace. And then, because the game is about fighting this corruption together, as you go through the game, you rack up corruption and things happen, and there are these consequences for the things that you're doing in game. And then at the end of the session, you come back and you say, okay, we'll do it again. We're going back to this space. Everyone takes a deep breath. Everyone closes their eyes. And we start out with, this is what the sanctuary looked like when we started today. How does it look now? What are you sharing and experiencing now? And it allows everyone to describe like the emotional journey that their characters have made through this, and sort of like give visuals to all of those things about the consequences that they've had to embrace to defend the city, or the rifts between members of the team, all this kind of thing. It's very effective for getting everyone into a headspace and then allowing a little bit of that breathing room at the end. I came up with this after doing a taiko Japanese drumming class, where they had to start by doing that because, everyone needs to be together and like really in tune with each other, similar to, the way that improv people will do, those warm-up exercises to kind of get everybody on the same page. And we found that it's very, very effective for reflecting on the characters in a way that you don't always get in other games. I know Masks has you at the end of the session say, okay, did you get closer to the team or further away, that sort of thing. And it was, inspired by that as well.
It's been this way to like bookend these games in a way that I didn't act. I mean, it sounded great, and then we started using it, and I started to see how powerful this mechanic was. When we had like one character in a one shot sacrifice themselves, and the other characters like almost didn't participate in the climax as much as I was kind of hoping they would, but it was all narratively perfect and everybody was fine with it. But then the rest that survived went back to that sanctuary and had that moment to debrief, basically psychically debrief, and tell me what had changed from this beautiful shining thing that happened that they described to me at the beginning of the game, and these subtle emotional changes that they described to the sanctuary at the end of the game made me start crying. Like, it was just like everybody got to have kind of like their last say. And then that's how you start the next game. This is where we were. And then this is where we're going to be. And like you can hopefully track, an increase in hope as time goes on, and it's not all just crying.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, it's like one of my favorite episodes of Young Justice, right? There's the failsafe episode where things are happening and then they deal with it, and talk to everybody afterwards of like, hey, some major stuff happened. Like, let's talk about it.
Yeah. And how does it make you emotionally? How does it change you? Right.
That I guess was my quote unquote cop out answer, but my quote unquote real answer is one of the corruption moves. So as you gain corruption, when you fill up the track, it's sort of like an experience track where you get in advance, except with corruption, you get access to these one-time use moves that do very powerful things and
with terrible consequences.
Maybe also some terrible things. So there's one called It's Alive.
Oh,
you bring an inhabitant back from the edge of death or repair life-changing harm despite all odds. It's very good. And then there's a bit about working with the player, if it's a PC that you're doing this for, to make sure that everybody's on board for it, that you've got consent. And if they accept, you describe how your initial attempts to help them failed, then describe how the corruption weaves itself into their ragged wounds to give them an unnatural life. Describe the personal and communal consequences of your intervention. And then it talks a little bit about some of the mechanics for how we model the corruption on the community map that's part of the game now.
That's wicked.
Yeah, the corruption moves are fantastic because they're all things where you go, oh, that's really good and very horrifying, and I want this to happen in my game.
Yeah. Each playbook has 3 personalized corruption moves, and then there's 2 that applied that to anyone. So there's 30 corruption moves, right? 10 playbooks there. Yep. So,
and they're all terrible.
And they're all just terrible. Terrible. We're terrible people.
Speaking of terrible people, Rich, what's your favorite move and why?
I'm going to focus on the hope punk part.
I don't know. You guys keep talking about crying, so I don't know how much hope you've talked about.
Well,
this is like tissue box gaming, guys.
we were talking with Taylor about this, and one of the things that I think hasn't shown up as much because we've been running so many one shots. You go into them with the drive it like you stole it, right? And you want to hit those notes of like, oh, okay, we did a thing, and woof. Where I think longer play will have more of that time to process things and then see the healing and see the harmony that builds up over time, and like the way the community
the community mechanics and how the community mechanics are more the long game.
We'll give it space for the contrast to form between the crying and I don't feel so much like crying this session.
Yeah, exactly. Well, one of the things that we talked about a lot, the 3 of us, is how we want to handle violence in the game.
Mm-hmm.
So we do have a violence move. It's called Unleash. It's actually not a basic move, and the consequences of that, there's always a consequence. So a 10 plus never gives you no consequence to your violent action. You still need to choose a consequence. I bring that up only because, not necessarily that Unleash is my favorite move, but the fact that how we look at violence. And almost all the playbooks have some version of a de-escalation move. And so one of my favorite moves is from the Orator playbook, and it's called Why Can't We Be Friends? It's their core move. They all start with this move. You know how to de-escalate conflicts with your words, actions, or presence. When you act to diffuse a tense situation, roll plus community, and then you get a few things. So if you get a hit, you de-escalate what's happening. That doesn't mean everybody gets along. It just means the immediate ramp up of conflict winds down. And then one of the choices could be those at odds become allies, if only temporarily. You gain an unexpected boon. Your words are noticed by a higher power, etc., etc. There's also the Muse has a similar one, but it's a de-escalation move that's actually has to do with animals that are in the area, so violent animals, and the Touchstone. They all have some way to try and navigate through and find alternatives to violence to solve conflict. And that's something that's really big to us because, conflict's going to happen. That's the name of the game, right? And violence may happen as well. But we want to have people just thinking about whether they should or could. Our Redeemed playbook is entirely based on the idea that you were created for facing conflict, and now you're trying to figure out what you are now because you're trying not to be that. So are you a hero? Are you a weapon? How are you a guardian of this civilization? And how do you question those things in your life?
Well, there's a lot of talk about this game. I think it might be fun to jump in and act under fire. What do you guys think about running this for us a little bit?
Sounds good.
Oh, yeah.
It is time to act under fire.
All right, it's time for Act Under Fire, where Rich Rogers and I will play a short actual play segment of Descent into Midnight. So, Rich and Richard, set a scene. Start the show.
I think I'm going to turn this one over to Rich.
That sounds good. So before we started, you guys decided two things. Rich, you were going to play the Redeemed playbook, which I just described a minute ago, and the species that you were inspired by, just the first thought you thought of, was a mer shark, which is interesting because you hadn't seen the Redeemed playbook yet, and the playtest art that happens to be on the Redeemed playbook is a four-armed mer shark, basically, which
it
is
was
really
meant to be.
meant to be. And Rach, you wanted to play a cultivator, and the cultivator is the bioengineers, the scientists, the researchers, the kind of the Iron Man, it's kind of the setting, but they use plants and animals and aspects of the echo and psionics to create these tools and devices. And you were inspired by a spider crab. We're going to go with a spider crab species and a mer shark species that live together in this metropolis. One of the other things that you had decided, which is fascinating to me, is that some ecological disaster happened on the surface, where air is the oxygen that's there is somehow tainted. Maybe it gets filtered into the oxygen. The oxygen gets filtered into the ocean a little bit so you guys can breathe, but you can't get fresh air up on the top. And around the city is what you discovered? A glowing purple algae haze is surrounding this city at the edge of the community. That we think is protecting the community, but it also has caused the community to lose contact with anything else that's happening outside of the community. And at some point, there was an escalation of conflict going on inside the city, and Rich, your redeemed wereshark was sent to try and help with that situation, and something didn't go right. So this cabin fever people were getting turned up. Tell me a little bit about what happened there.
Well, the way I'm seeing the cabin fever affecting folks is that, even the largest, most beautiful prison is a prison nonetheless. And so
Nice.
Just conceptually, people were angry at being pinched in. There were rumors that purple haze wasn't actually detrimental, that someone was stealing the land outside of our domain. And so I was asked to go in and try to de-escalate the conflict, to talk sense into the folks who were throwing out wild conspiracy theories, and then things edged towards violence.
You guys have your names here for your characters, right? So we've got Plussy the Wereshark.
That's a name.
That's a name. And do you have a name for your spider crab cultivator?
Yes, I have Tem as their name.
Tem and Plussy. Plussy, you lost control. Tem was there. They were able to kind of get you back, like calmed. Basically, this pressure got relieved a little bit. Some other security came into the area to kind of weed that down. But it's now been a couple of days later, and one of the individuals, a wereshark member of your species, who was there that you had gotten a kind of a look at, but looked like they had been leading this riling up of people in this mob. Once you arrived, they kind of stopped talking and backed away and watched what was happening. It's a couple of days later, and you get a heads up that one of the research labs that Tem had worked at in the past has got a breakthrough. They might be able to send someone on the other side of that wall to see what's going on, this purplish algae haze. And they would like you to escort the individual who's going to be basically aquanauting across this barrier into the ocean, the two of you, because they're concerned that there might be some additional issues.
Of course I would be more than happy to do such a thing. It's an honor. And I think that Tem is obviously the best candidate. And I would put their name in.
Perfect.
Speak strongly that my friend Tem would be the best aquanaut for this.
Oh, so you want to pitch that Tem might actually be the one to go across that boundary. They say that they would.
I haven't really asked Tem if they're okay with that. But yeah, that's so totally.
My position is to observe. I was hoping that we would send like a individual third party and, skillfully assist when needed.
Yeah, I didn't even ask Tem, so I just volunteered Tem.
Now,
Oh no.
Oh no.
Now, Tem, you hear about what's happening here, and you have a garden. So your core move involves this. It's called Seafoam Green Thumb, and you have grown things in this garden that help you. And two of the things you chose were prophetic spores and living security, correct?
Yes.
So what I would like you to do is I would like you to go ahead and roll. When you spend downtime tending your garden, roll plus altruism.
So that was like 14.
Okay, so well played. So on a hit, your garden thrives and hold 3 growth. And on a 10 plus, you can choose a few additional things. You can either mark harmony, clear a condition, or clear a corruption. If this was another one-shot, I would start you guys with some conditions and corruption just for the fun of it. But if you like, you can mark harmony. And then you may spend growth to describe how your garden's benefits help you. If you do, improve a roll that you just made by 1 per growth spent. So you have prophetic spores, which is a very helpful thing to do. So helpful thing to have. So when you get to this research facility and they have an aquanaut that's ready to go out through this algal bloom, they protect you both with some bioengineered clothing, basically like an astronaut suit in case some emergency comes up and happens this close to the algal bloom. So tell me, and Richard, I want you to jump in on this too, since you're kind of at the table here, so to speak.
Sure.
What does a wereshark's highly advanced bioengineered protective suit look like?
What I think it is, they have created a species of sea star, like feathery sea stars, right? And so it's almost like you're getting mobbed by this swarm of feather dusters, right? And then like you there's just sort of this cloud of them that encase you, and then there are a few transparent jellyfish that sort of like swim up to your eyes and to be the transparent parts of it. And then there's some specialized like nudibranchs that go and place themselves onto your gills
to filter.
And so it all just sort of like compresses down, and when it's finished, it almost looks like, if you've seen like a sea otter when they're out of the water a little bit, they've got that like fur that it's mostly slick, but there's like the bits that sort of stick out.
Uh-huh.
So it's like that. So you're encased in this sort of weird, slick substance that has these bits of the ends of the feathers that stick out just a little bit. And then you've got jellyfish goggles and little like vibrant neon nudibranch gill flap things that sort of just spread out like an axolotl.
Fantastic. It's like I'm picturing like Iron Man, but like when it's done, like all the nanotech comes on, but then when it's done, it's got basically jellyfish goggles on.
Yeah.
It's quite the look there.
I love it. I'm going to say that there's something very similar, because of the way you described it, for our spider crab friend. So this wereshark is about ready to head out. They've got it connected. The wereshark is actually connected via this cable back for protection, and they go through. Something happens behind you. There is an explosion behind you in the facility. What do you do?
I'd like to reach out. Do we have a psionic communication with anyone back at the lab, as it were?
Uh-huh. Yeah, so you have some communication. What you're getting is like the babblefish or whatever equivalent that you've got going on that's connecting you telepathically to the people there. All you're getting is a rush of emotion, a rush of thoughts, a rush of panic. There's just it's almost flooding, overwhelming you and flooding you. You can feel your anxiety going up just connecting with the people that are back there.
If that's the only information, I'll cut it off, because that could affect the mission. But Tem, you heard that. What happened?
I'm on it. As a cultivator, is there any way for me to sort of rapidly... I have a scientifically wired brain. I want to start rapidly filing some information one way or another, and maybe if not get a sense of the full picture, at least distill it a little bit.
Yes, absolutely. You can... It sounds like you're trying to scan the environment to me. Like take in a bunch of information at once. So what you're going to want to do is roll plus community.
So that would be an 8.
Okay. You are holding 3 growth, and you have prophetic spores and living security. Both of those things, there's in my head, feel like they have like visual and sensory input things that could be involved that might help you with that role. Can you describe how you might use prophetic spores or your living security that might increase your role?
So is it increased by 1 each time so we can stack?
Correct.
So I definitely think with the prophetic spores, there was a notion that Tem got that if Tem was to dismiss the role that Plessy wanted for Tem, which was to be the Aquanaut and going through, that there would be like a resulting tragedy or something bad would happen. That Tem dismissed at that time.
Oh.
But definitely got that clear impression.
Interesting. Okay. You get that, and you're going to spend 2 growth, and you'll get a 10?
Yeah.
Great. So I'm going to give you some information, and you're going to get a +1 forward when acting on this information. Part of that prophecy now, you see in your mind, you go back to see that vision that you had, that there would be some tragedy that's happening, and you can see it happening now. It's almost like real time in echoing with your prophecy from before. And you see that wereshark person that you have now seen in this bond that you have with Plessy, that was there a few days ago, that was riling up the mob. You see them inside that building, and they are going to affect the support system, the air system that's pumping out, the clean water oxygenated system that's pumping out to the Aquanaut. They're inside the building right now, and they and a few people that they're with are going to do something to this device that will probably result in something fatal for the Aquanaut.
And we can communicate without our little telepathic devices, right?
You and Plessy are bonded. You know anything that the other person wants them to know at all times.
Hey, Plessy, do you remember that guy who tried to rile you up, that shark guy?
Fezzik. Yes.
I think there's a little bit more to Fezzik than we initially thought. I'm remembering something that I caught from the spores before the experiment today. I think he's going to try to sabotage the mission and then kill the Aquanaut we got sent out into the haze.
Oh, rip his fins!
I love it.
Yeah.
So,
Plessy smash.
Plessy, what are you going to do?
I'm heading back. Oh man, I gotta this is precious, these things that they've given to us. So I will have to extricate myself as quickly as possible from the suit, the Sea Star armor, and the jellyfish goggles, so that I can make my way back to Fezzik.
I'm going to say there's basically a psionic trigger that allows it to all like split open.
What do you put out there? What energy do you put out there to get it to like deactivate and spread out?
Oh, I think of my activation word, quellish.
Nice. Okay. So you're just booking it over there, and there's just like this trail of these big like feather motes, almost like those little Sudosudosuke and Miyazaki movies, the little like soot sprites, but these just feather things are just like trailing off of you as you're going forward towards the building. Awesome.
Yes, I love this soot sprite vision. So you burst out of this arm and you're heading in there. Tem, are you staying where you are for now?
I'm going to secure this position here. Worst case scenario, I'm going to maybe in a moment see if there's anything I can jury rig to protect this. Imagine it's some sort of bio hose line connecting our shark aquanaut friend to the operations.
Nice.
It's a really, really, really long bobbit worm.
Ugh.
I'm okay with that.
Not if you knew what a bobbit worm was. It's a terrible idea. Anyway, so plus you get into the building, and there's Fezzik? There's Fezzik and two enormous spider crabs, members of the spider crab species with them. The two spider crabs are actually interacting with this huge device that is continuously filtering water to make sure that it's clean and clear for this aquanaut. Fezzik is there, and he's got one of the security officers, and he puts the security officer down, who's now unconscious, kind of floating away, and he turns to see you. What do you do?
Fezzik, I have seen your treachery. Leave this place, or I will hurt you.
Treachery? What's outside? What's outside? They're going to do this and control what's outside? We're going to stop this filter. We're going to stop this, and you will see that aquanaut will survive. You'll see that they will bring that person back in here, and there will be nothing wrong with them, and that they are keeping us trapped here on purpose.
You must have patience, Fezzik. You must listen to me. We will take this aquanaut, they will research, and if it is safe, then we will travel to the other side. No sooner.
I'm going to have you, there's another move, and it's called Go To It Laughing, right? Seems like I'm feeling you're kind of like, you're like in this. You're facing him down. It's when you face a threat with joy in your heart. Now, whether that means you come to violence with peace in your heart, or whether you come with violence excited to participate in that violence, you can roll plus drive. And it may allow you to do some things in this situation.
All right. My drive is a 1. And I've rolled a 7, plus 1 is an 8.
All right. You surprise, frightened, or awe those nearby, and you can choose one. The current threat ignores your companions. You take plus 1 ongoing against the antagonist in the scene, or you keep yourself out of danger.
Why would I ever keep myself out of danger? And the threat is already ignoring my companions, so I will take plus 1 ongoing against antagonists in the scene.
Perfect. So you can surprise, frighten, or awe him.
I think I have surprised him by not completely dismissing his concerns, but asking for patience.
Yeah, I think that's true. That feels right to me. And I'm feeling like he takes a step back and there's a pause. But the spider crabs complete the thing that they wanted to do. Well, at least one of them does. And the machine starts to shut down. So outside, Tem, there is a move, which it sounded like you probably would have taken based on what you had said, called The Reef Protects Its Own. Through genetic manipulation, bioelectric triggers, and psionic activation, you could rapidly create a garden in the surrounding area that allows you to defend your allies. So it sounds like you're using some of the garden that you brought with them, basically your utility belt, to try and defend this aquanaut from losing their oxygen supply. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I think the way I would describe that is I've got little bits and pieces of that natural biological security of which we could possibly, again, knowing this was like a biotube, cut into the tube and act as a natural purifier.
Ooh, I love that.
Ooh.
All right, great. So you're going to roll to defend another, and so that's rolling plus altruism.
I'm pretty altruistic, so that was an 11.
Great. I was going to give you the plus 1 from that you got plus 1 forward from before with your scanning the environment, but you didn't need that. So On a hit, and basically on a defend another, you successfully defend them and filter them. And any ally you successfully defend takes +1 forward as the living world continues to aid them. This is an NPC, so this doesn't really come up necessarily. And so you have actually protected this person by making a makeshift filter. They end up coming back from the other side of that wall. And they come back from the other side of that wall and they disengage their helmet. And they have a container with them that has something that they have taken from the other side, basically water from the other side. And inside that water from the other side is this glowing gold algae that is beyond the purple haze. And he looks at you and shakes his head and says, "I don't think we can ever go out there."
What is this?
"I don't know." And you, Plussy, see everything that Tem is seeing and hear everything that Tem has heard. How do you react to that, or how do you interact with Fezzik with that?
Fezzik, the Aquanaut has returned. It is not good. Tell your friends to stop this madness. We need to understand what the threat is outside. Fighting between ourselves is only weakening us.
It sounds like what you're trying to do is salve wounds. It sounds like you're trying to calm him down, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in our game, we're playing with mechanics in which NPCs start with certain conditions marked. In this case, he has 2 conditions marked. He has selfish and angry. So you can roll to salve wounds.
All right.
And if you can reduce those conditions on him, if you successfully can remove those conditions on him, then you might get him on your side, or at least lower him down from his anger or selfishness.
All right. Salving wounds is rolling plus hope, and I have a +1 in hope. I have rolled a 7. +1 is an 8.
Fantastic.
7 to 9. Looks like on a hit, render aid. So.
Perfect. So you've successfully rendered aid, and you can remove one of those conditions. Selfish or angry?
Remove selfish. He could be angry.
And
that's quite
that
all
was
right.
the right choice.
Mm-hmm.
So he's still upset, and he's angry and turning his anger at you, emotional anger at you, but he steps down, and he gets his allies to step away from the device. And we'll wrap it there.
All right.
You guys rolled really well, by the way.
Yeah.
We did.
It was-
We had lots of +1s.
Yes,
so
it
that
was uncannily well for me, actually. I was like, okay.
That was a great example of like finding alternate routes to solve the problem without just fighting what was happening, and being able to defend this Aquanaut to get more knowledge and information. That was great. I love the filter. That was awesome.
Yeah.
So, Richard and Rich, where can our listeners go find the playtest materials for Descent into Midnight?
All right. You can go to www.descentintomidnight.com. We've got the playtest packet there available through a Google Drive link where you can get all the playbooks and everything you'll need.
And where can our listeners also find more of your work?
So for me, you can find my stuff at origamigaming.com. You can find myself on Twitter at rkreutzlandry. You can find Taylor at Leviathan Files on Twitter. And Rich?
And you can find me at Umbral Walker, UMBRALWALKER. On Twitter, you can also find me at Whelm the Young Justice Files, which is at the YJ Files, or crashingthemode.com, where you could pop over and listen to an episode with the amazing Rich Rogers, who guested on our show.
You remember that one from way
back when.
Hey.
And if you're looking for more information to keep up to date with Descent into Midnight, the best place to do it is on Twitter at DIMRPG. That's where we're most active. We do have a Facebook page, but that gets updated a little less often.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for coming on +1 Forward. It was a joy to have you.
Thanks so much.
Hey, it was a pleasure to be here. We got Rich, and Rach, and Taylor was joking that he just was not destined to be on this episode because
Too rich for his
yeah.
blood.
It was fate.
Oh my gosh.
+1 Forward is a production of the Gauntlet community, Richard Rogers and Rach Shelkey. You can find us at gauntlet-rpg.com or follow us on Twitter at +1FWD. If you would like to support our show, visit our Patreon site at patreon.com/gauntlet. The games mentioned on this show use the Apocalypse engine, which is a creation of Vincent and Magay Baker. The music for +1 Forward is from the Savage Aural Hotbed CD Gomi Daiko. The songs used are Gomi Daiko, Metal Version, and Drowning Attitude. You can find more amazing tunes by Savage Aural Hotbed on their website, www.savageauralhotbed.com.
Hello, listeners. We have two important pieces of Codex news to share with you. The first is that the hardcover edition of Codex Volume 1 is now available for purchase through Indie Press Revolution. This book is an exquisitely crafted journey into the early days of Codex magazine. It features the first 13 issues of Codex, including the original test issue, Codex Blood, as well as the Discern Realities Dungeon World Annual. The book features 300 full-color pages, 150 GSM paper, a spot UV cover, and a ribbon bookmark. It's a fantastic collector's item and would make a wonderful holiday gift. The next thing we want to tell you is that November is Catch Up on Codex Month. We're very proud of the Codex magazine. We want as many people as possible to check out all the amazing game material and artwork found inside its pages. With that in mind, anyone who pledges $6 or more to the Gauntlet Patreon in November will get the first 4 PDF issues of Codex Volume 4 as part of their pledge. That's Codex Melancholy, Gold, Childhood, and the newest issue, Void. These are easily 4 of the best issues we have ever produced, and you can get them all for a single pledge in November. And you'll get a new issue of Codex every month so long as your pledge stays active. So please check out the beautiful hardcover Codex Volume 1 book and the Catch Up on Codex Patreon special. We'll have links in the show notes.
Decent into midnight.
Yep.
Decent into midnight.
Oh, Decent into midnight is like the PG version of Urban Shadows, where there's like intimacy moves are just like always fade to black.
Oh.
Actually, we couldn't figure out if we were going to make this a kids version or an after dark version, but we're going to call it DIM, right? Dim the lights.
Yeah.
Instead of Descend on Midnight.